Hello and welcome to a bonus episode of Kill James Bond. You know who we are, I hope, but just in case you don't, I am Alice Caldwell-Kelly. I'm joined as always by my friends Abigail Thorn and Devon.
Bonjour!
If you don't know who I am at this point, that's on you.
Yeah, and so I picked out something that I've been saving for a long time, Jean-Luc Godard's fourth movie, Vivre sa vie. And I don't really have a favorite film because my brain doesn't work like that. But if you put a gun to my head and said, stop saying films, say one film only, it would be this, right? This would be my favorite film. And I'm really nervous about this episode because I've kind of established myself over the course of doing this podcast as Ms. Film Studies. There is a lot of film studies in this. This is a film studies ass movie, and I want to do it justice. And I don't know. There's a lot there, and I don't know if I'm equal to the task. But I'm glad that I have my two friends to help me out with this.
This is one of those movies where you watch it and you're immediately taken over by, oh, I'm watching a movie here. I've got a thing going on. I need to pay full attention to this and think about what I'm being shown. And there's been a lot of writing about this film. I don't know how firmly I think I have anything new to say.
People are interested in hearing us talk about it, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was all right.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's banging, isn't it?
That's all right. It's kind of drags in places, but it's okay. I don't get it.
If you saw Stella Artois adverts, which I know is as a sort of northerner, is Abby's way of interacting with media preeminently.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They had this thing.
The standard order when I used to work in the pub was 2 pints of Stella and a Pinot Grigio with ice. That was for a couple too. That's 2 pints of Stella for one man, and then a Pinot Grigio with ice for his lady friend.
These are gender roles.
You got to get the Scampi crisps as well.
Yeah. But so if you remember the ads that they put out that were taking the piss out of film genres, one of them was the French art film, the French new wave art film, where it's lots of sort of people talking to camera, black and white subtitles about their sort of ennui, right?
Yes.
That's this, right? That's a thing that exists for you to make fun of because of films like this. And this is one of the sort of originators of that.
We do the purification so the glass is clean and cold, otherwise the head would dissipate too quickly. That would be terrible, shrinking until being as small as a little sparrow that would have lost his mom in the dark forest. Step 2, the sacrifice. Don't be scared. It's not a human sacrifice.
And so, Vivre sa vie, to live her life, right? It's a kind of bland quotidian title. It's Godard's fourth movie. And he made it with his wife, Anna Karina. And let me just say, first and foremost, we've been talking about having 1960s woman dysphoria on this podcast.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
This, to me, is the sort of boss battle of 1960s woman dysphoria, because ever since I saw this, which I did at quite a young age, I have had Anna Karina dysphoria, specifically. And Jean-Luc Godard and I are of one mind on this, because in the course of making this movie, it is very clear that he believes that Anna Karina is the most beautiful woman in the world, and so do I. So
she's definitely up there.
I mean, that's what you want to do. If you're putting your wife in a film, you want it to be very, very clear that you are horny as shit.
Look at my hot wife.
For your wife.
Yes, yeah. It is absolutely Look at My Hot Wife, the movie. And there are so many close-ups. I mean, the titles start with profile, close-up, other profile of Anna Karina.
Yeah, my notes say incredible side profile, who's her surgeon. Incredible front profile, who's her surgeon.
Yes.
Incredible side profile, who's her surgeon.
I wrote down every day of my life, I show my hairdresser stills from this movie, and he still has yet to get it right. This is deep Alice lore, right? Is that if you want to understand why I'm like this, and also why my hair looks like this, it's because I got really into French New Wave movies. And fucking Belle and Sebastian. I was insufferable. And sort of my latter adolescence was largely the long blonde song Lust in the Movies. And so, it just sort of colonized a whole area of my brain.
Most of this scene is only shot, we only see the backs of their heads, which I was, it was oh, that's interesting. Why are we doing this? And I was oh, and this is something that happens a lot throughout the film. My thought is that this is kind of how Nana perceives the world, as being faceless and without sympathy, without compassionate eyes to gaze into. we spend as much time in this film looking at the backs of people's heads as we do as their faces. And I guess that's kind of like how she feels about the world, because as we learn, she's very sad, she's very unfulfilled, she's cheated on him, and she's just like pretty fucking miserable, to be honest.
Yeah. There is one thing I want to put down that I'm going to pick up later, which is this is mostly the backs of their heads, but you do see her face in the mirror behind the bar, sort of distantly. And I will come back to that later. And so much of this stuff, like the soundtrack or like, you know, the cinematography like that, it feels wrong, and it's wrong on purpose. And this is one of the things where, like, if you're watching this sort of inattentively, you think, oh, this guy's a fucking idiot. He doesn't know how to make a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, she's not in frame. You got to point the camera at someone's face.
You can't see the person she's talking to, mate. You can only see her back of her head and the front of her face.
Yeah, you've only got the soundtrack keeps cutting out.
Yeah.
What's going on? But it's on for a purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. For its Fremdom's effect, isn't it?
And incidentally, as they're playing pinball, Paul mentions his father, who's presumably a teacher. His kids have done some essays that sort of like are accidentally very good. And this one little girl has written, "A bird is an animal with an inside and an outside. You remove the outside and you see the inside. You remove the inside and you see the soul." And this is a movie that Godard has said is about sort of like trying to see someone from the outside in, trying to sort of like examine a mind or a soul from like the outside without a lot of cues.
It's also remarkably unsubtle in that a bird or a chick translates into the French as well. It also just kind of means generally abroad.
Yeah, broads have souls, it turns out.
Women!
Yeah. What?
Just found out about this.
Oh, damn. When did this come in?
Yeah.
I guess month 3 of the estrogen, I think, is when the soul emerges.
Sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite early, actually.
And the sound completely cuts out, and we go to the next
Life begins at transition. That's
basically, yeah.
Weird, like hyper-Catholic. Like nobody is alive. Nobody has a soul except trans people. That would be a hell of a fucking twist if we got to heaven and we the only ones there.
No, it's fine. I just didn't expect it to be trans, you know?
I'm willing to say that's the stance of the podcast. Life begins at transition can be the tagline.
Only trans people go to heaven. All and only. Because she then she goes to the cinema. She gets some of the pictures of their son from Paul. She goes to the cinema to see Joan of Arc.
So this is
she does,
my favorite scene in a movie.
I've written "what a shot, fuck" twice in a row.
Yeah. So she goes to the movies with the man presumably that she's been cheating on Paul with, and we see him like put his hand around her shoulder, sort of like quite possessively, and she watches Carl Theodor Dreyer's Passion of Joan of Arc, which is a beautiful film. It's just like it's cut into this, and you see Joan of Arc sort of like conscious martyrdom at the hands of like evil men, right? And she's weeping, and we see Nana weeping at the screen as well. And there's like 50 different things here, and I could talk about this scene for about 3 hours, I think, because she's going to the cinema because she's been kicked out of her apartment because she can't make rent. She's doing that as a way not to escape, quite the opposite, but it's like to continue living and to see herself, right? And there's this thing specifically about cinema in this movie as an act of mimesis, right? As an act of mimicking, right? You contextualize yourself through cinema, and cinema has this kind of like refractive quality. There's this optical effect called mise en abîme, like to be placed in the abyss, which is that's the like sort of technical like painterly term for like reflect, like something reflecting out to infinity, an image like containing itself out to infinity. And it's why I mentioned the shot of her in the mirror in the cafe in the beginning, is because that reminded me of Velázquez's Las Meninas.
Oh, like in Star Wars Episode 8, which goes into the cave.
It's exactly right, because that shot is yeah, you are, because that shot is a tribute to a shot doing the same thing in Citizen Kane. And this too is an example of sort of like cinema as a kind of like as the abyss, but as a kind of like reflective abyss, as a series of infinite mirrors. And it's funny because I've seen this movie like bar one every decade of my life. I plan to in the future. And like the first time that I saw this movie, I hadn't transitioned yet. And I was sort of like, this scene made me cry, right? And there is a refractive quality of this is a woman crying at a woman crying at a woman, sort of a second order reflection, right? That I think is, I find that really compelling, not the least because one of Joan of Arc's lines in the thing is, God knows he leads us, but we only know our path when the journey is over.
It's so the scene specifically that's being shown is the one where Joan of Arc is informed that she will be put to death on the pyre.
Yes.
And she's like, sick,
She
cool.
accepts it, and she's like,
great.
fine, whatever. I'm getting martyred, baby. I'm all about this.
Yeah, that's what I wanted, actually. Fuck you.
I mean, that's not strictly, I think, what the...
No, they said in French, but...
Yeah, so this is the thing. This is the, like, thesis of the movie, I guess, is that, like, this is what art is for. It allows us to mimic, but we mimic imperfectly and according to our conditions, right? So that you're not actually Joan of Arc. You are a, 26-year-old Anna Karina in a sort of, like, shitty cinema in suburban Paris. Or, you are me watching this for the first time, or, you listening to this. And you kind of, like, touch the infinite in that way, but in a really kind of, like, conditional, compromised way.
I do think that it says something about Nana that this is the scene that particularly moves her. Because I think this, this kind of does Joan of Arc dirty. Like, Joan of Arc fought. Like, she was a rebel and a fighter, whereas one of the reasons I don't particularly like Nana as a protagonist is she's a bit fucking wet. Like, she just rolls over and fucking dies. And I'm like,
No, it's a sort of conscious embrace of, like, passivity as martyrdom, right? And this is one of the things that the movie is about, and it makes Nana quite alienating if you're a person who does not like passivity, or if you're, like, afraid of being passive. Whereas, like, for me, I think that this is, like, I don't know. I look at this and I think this is maybe, like, the most beautiful human face I've ever seen as she's watching this film. And yeah, to me, this is just like, this completely reconfigured my brain when I saw it for the first time.
Oh, thank you for sharing this with me.
Yeah, of course.
I've forgotten I'm doing a podcast here and I'm just really earnestly listening to you talk. I gotta do a joke in a minute or something.
Yeah. The thing is, all of my notes at this point sort of turn into the sort of ravings of a madwoman, where I try to explain what I feel, and what I feel is a lot, right? And it's kind of often not congruent with a comedy podcast about a film, right?
I think that was the most sanely and logically put ravings of a mad woman I've ever heard
definitely.
in my fucking life.
It's very coherent.
She goes to the cinema and she goes, she just liked me for real. And you go to the cinema and you go, fuck, she just liked me for real also.
Yes.
And now, listener, you are the fourth in the chain. Be like, wow, they all three are just like me for real.
That's right. Turns out, transition your gender, take this as a sign, do it. Yeah.